Submitted for your approval. Submitted for your approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted
Light.
for your approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted
Light.
for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted
Light.
for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another dimension. Self.
Submitted
Light.
for your
Shadow.
approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Hello, hello, hello. You're listening to a podcast not only of sound, but also of mind. It's Time to Rewind is a podcast that takes a journey into a wondrous land of time loops whose boundaries are that of imagination. Each episode, my guest and I explore these time loops one loop at a time. This stop is Trapped in the Twilight Zone, and this is the second stop at 1985's Season 1, Episode 23's first segment, Shadow Play. Here with me is my guest, comedian and podcaster Alice Lauren. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing great. So this is the end of our recurring dream here with Shadow Play. We've got one last time through here, and similar to the last one, this is just like a couple minutes segment. And the 1985 version, where once again all the roles are switched around, and they're not actually switched around in exactly the same sequence as the previous version. This time, his jailmate across the hall is now his defense lawyer, and his defense lawyer is now the judge. And his father that played the priest is now the jury foreman. And then I couldn't recognize right off the bat who played the new DA.
I didn't quite recognize. I was trying to figure out.
Yeah, one other thing that I remembered that this one did differently is, and I think again it fits with the idea that he gets a lot of the information for what's happening in his dream from bad movies, is that the one prison guard is kind of an abusive prison guard. He's very rough with him, and he shoves him into the cell. He makes fun of him a little bit.
Oh, you mean like at the very end when he's going up to the judge? I was kind of upset that he really just played it straight again and again. Like, I don't understand why he didn't have kind of a different reaction. It was like, where do you get that same anger again and again? You've been through this enough that you shouldn't have to have, the same kind of vitriol and the same kind of, I'm going to have, an identical tantrum from the last loop.
Well, I mean, going back to the main part of the loop, the prison guard, whenever he's being led to his cell, and he's like, which one is it? It's not always the same.
Oh, yeah.
That guard, he is kind of the stereotypical, angry prison guard.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine him definitely dreaming up some angry, violent guard, like in the movies.
Yeah, but, going back to this section, and again, I know he plays it once again very similarly, and like you said, it's strange that he doesn't really try to behave any differently. He still gets the little bit of a laugh, which I don't think we talked about this in the 1961 version, because that was one thing that I did really like.
I would too. I would definitely as well. If I was going through a loop, I'd have that oh my gosh, I am just a crazy person laughing, or here we go again.
Yeah, it's like whenever they sentence him, in the 61 version, he starts this hysterical laughter, which at first, for a couple seconds, you can't tell whether or not he's crying or laughing, and then you realize that he is laughing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh yeah, only the subtitles could tell me he was laughing.
Yeah. And in this one, his laugh is a bit more subtle, I think, and then he jumps right into, fighting against it, and he's like, no, not this time. I'm not going through this one again.
Oh yeah, as soon as he said, as soon as he, at this point, said, I'm not going through this again, I'm done, whatever, I thought, oh my god, that's it. He's gonna just try to walk out of the courtroom, he's gonna just he's gonna change it up. I thought when he said this, okay, that's it, he's gonna change it up, and then was let down when he had an identical performance from the last loop.
Yeah, like once again, it happens almost exactly the same way that it happened at the beginning of this episode, except for the fact that that all the characters are in different places, and once again, it's nice that they did bring back the woman lawyer who is now playing the judge.
Oh yeah, and the way that they really, embodied these new characters. I mean, that's tough as well. I mean, playing multiple characters. That was definitely very fascinating.
Yeah, because like in this version, the guy that was playing his in the cell across from him, I believe the actor was Earl Billings. He played Jimmy. Like as the cellmate, he was very scared and anxious, and he played that role very well. And then now he's the defense lawyer, and he's perfectly calm and in charge, and everything's acting extremely normal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice to get the two different sides of him.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I was thinking of the judge as well. Being the going from being the lawyer to being the judge. I mean, I don't know if this is necessarily like in this part, but I think it really tried to open my mind to other, I don't know, not conspiracy theories, but like other theories, almost like whose dream is it? I mean, obviously we know like that it's Adam's, but then I think especially when the lawyers and the wife are all talking and kind of realizing they're not exactly sentient beings, it kind of opened up to like their dreams and who are they, and you know.
Yeah, and I mentioned this before, but I do like that in this version we do get a little bit better sense of who Adam Grant is whenever he's awake. Like we still don't get any like a lot of personal details like what his job is or anything else, but we do get the fact that he has a sister and he has a sibling rivalry where his sister hates him, and then his father has passed
He's being
away.
tortured, yeah, and then he's being tortured, basically tortured by this dream, trying to figure out why am I having this dream in the first place. I mean, we get more of I think the was it Carol? I don't know. The woman's line about he murdered her in cold blood. We get a little bit more because we wonder what this crime was besides like, oh, just first degree murder. Okay.
And I wasn't sure, but I did just now look it up, and the closing narration, even though it is performed by Charles Aidman instead of Rod Serling, is still the exact same text as the Rod Serling narration from the 1961 version.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I think the fact that a lot of the dialogue, though, like obviously there was added dialogue, added details we spoke about, but the fact there was a lot of the same dialogue, I mean, added to the Twilight Zone effect, but also, especially after watching, the last one right before, but it also just kind of, a little bit annoying, like, oh God, I really am watching the same thing with the same exact lines, that you're kind of, itching for more. You're happy that they, added more depth to this one.
Watching them, like, I'm guessing that we both pretty much watched them back to back. I did notice a lot of instances where they had like exactly the same line. I think it was especially noticeable at the beginning. Like I think the trial scene was almost word for word up until they mentioned hanging instead of the electric chair.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's not how a reboot would be today. I mean, at first, before I realized that it was the '85 version, I was looking at the 2019, version for the episode, because I was thinking, especially with like Jordan Peele doing it in 2019, I thought maybe this would be a very interesting kind of, metaphor for like, black men continuing to be convicted of the same thing, and it's always a loop, it's always, some sort of like a racial undertone in this at first. It would be very interesting if they made another episode today. Again rebooting.
But I believe that the 1985 version was hour-long episodes. But what they did instead was each episode they would have different segments, and the segments would be shorter. So this was still like a half-hour section, or a half-hour segment as a part of a 1 hour episode.
I know we talked about kind of like, what the overarching theme was, but it wasn't all time loop.
No, there was a lot of the episodes, like there was a lot of morality plays, type things, and a lot of just almost horror-esque stories, and
Right.
like what if, sort of thing. There was like well over 100 episodes, and
Yeah.
in the 1960, in the first 5 seasons from the 60s, and only 3 episodes had some hint of a time loop to it.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, man, it all sounds juicy. Yes. Too much to binge, but definitely draws me in.
Yeah, my suggestion would be, like, if you are gonna watch more episodes, like look up a best of Twilight Zone episodes and start with those episodes.
Okay. So don't start, 1961 episode 1 or okay.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some good ones in season 1, but like you said, there's a lot of episodes, so I would start with the best ones.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and you're not missing anything. They don't connect. You said so. It's not like, oh God, if I don't watch, 2 before I watch 3 or something.
Yeah, and a lot of those best ones, I'm sure you'll recognize like the overarching story, because a lot of the Twilight Zone episodes have been referenced in pop culture. I think one of the most popular ones is like the Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, the one with William Shatner, and he sees a gremlin on the wing of the plane, and he tries to convince everybody that there's a gremlin on the wing of the plane, and nobody believes him because every time anybody else looks out the window, they don't see it, and he's the only one that sees it. One of the better episodes, and that's something that's been referenced a lot. I mean, they've had a Simpsons episode, they've had several Simpsons episodes that were.
I was gonna say like maybe Family Guy or something. Yeah.
I think we covered pretty much everything in the first 3 episodes. Talking about this, I think it was, both of these were good episodes, and I think you mentioned that you kind of like the 1985 version a little bit better.
I think so. Yeah, it might be harder to find. I mean, part of me is like, could I even try, the 2019? Because it really has like the 60s but yeah, I think the 85 probably was better, at least with like fleshing things out a bit more. I wonder if that's the case, in all of them, and I'm sure 2019 will add a lot of modern, things to it. And that's why I was thinking about, I'm sure they're going to add a lot more like, racial undertones, sexist undertones, not sexist, but about, gender and sexuality undertones, a lot to really bring it to this modern audience.
Yeah, that's one thing that the 2019 series does really well, is it combines, the spirit of the Twilight Zone, and it brings in a lot of the horror aspects of it, and the creepiness. It keeps that vibe, and I don't believe any of them are, straight remakes, because like this 1985 version was a straight up remake.
Yeah, that's where I saw the plane one. I thought was also 20. Maybe not.
Yeah, but they're not like a straight up remake. It's more like they were inspired by the original episode, and they like take it, like they have hints of that episode, but the overarching story is, 90% different.
Okay.
Where, like, in the 2 episodes that we watched, both of these shadow plays, there's only, 15% difference between the 2 of the episodes.
Yeah.
But in any of the, 2019 episodes that recall previous Twilight Zone episodes, they're pretty much homages rather than full-on remakes.
Interesting. Okay.
And they do bring in a lot of the social commentary too, which I think there is a lot of that in the original Twilight Zone.
Something about it feels very timeless as well. I mean, I'm already, questioning reality, and how do you know that what you're in right now is, dreaming and or not dreaming?
Yeah, I think some of that social commentary is lost due to time just because of, society is very different now than it was in the 60s, but a lot of that's still there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
All right, but, for the last time, I'd like to thank you for joining me today. It was a lot of fun talking about these episodes.
So much fun. Thank you.
And once again, why don't you go ahead and remind everybody where they can find you online?
Sure. So my Twitter is Pod Socialite, where I tweet about all my podcast appearances, or movies and music and pop culture. My TikTok is Podcast Socialite. My Venmo is that as well. If you like what you heard, give me a few dollars. And my Facebook is Alice Lauren. I use that the most. If you wanna message me, let me know where you heard me. I'd love to chat.
All right, and as always, I am Bubbawheat, and you can find me at flightstightsandmovienights.com, where you can also find nearly 600 written reviews of superhero and comic book movies. You can find me on Twitter at Bubbawheat, and you can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on Anchor.fm, as well as anywhere else where you listen to podcasts. And so until next time, I will still be right here, trapped in the Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval. Submitted for your approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted
Light.
for your approval.
Another dimension. Light.
for your
Shadow. Another dimension. Light.
for your
Shadow. Another dimension.
Self.
Light.
for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Think about it, and then ask yourself, do you live here, in this country, in this world, or do you live instead in the Twilight Zone?